Hello everyone, welcome to all of you on my YouTube channel Saurabh Goswami, History Optional for UPSC, and today we are going to discuss the theme, the historiographical perspectives of the topic Portuguese arrival in India. And in this History Optional lecture series, this is lecture number 5 that is related to chapter 1. Here History Optional is discussed for UPSC mains examination in chapter wise, topic and subtopic wise format, and we are covering the chapter 1 from paper 2 section A, that is modern Indian history, and the name of the chapter was European penetration in India. And the first important subtopic in that chapter was Portuguese presence in India, arrival in India, and now we are going to discuss part 5 of the same chapter. So today we will discuss different historiographical perspectives. We all know that in history there are different approaches to look at any particular event. There are different schools of historiography too. You might have heard the names like colonial historiography, nationalist historiography, Marxist historiography, subaltern historiography, Cambridge school. So these are different schools of historiography. It is very much important to understand the historical perspectives. The reason is that many a times UPSC used to ask statement based questions in the mains examination. Unless you don't understand the historical insights perspectives, so in that case the question appears to be difficult for you, and finally if you are not familiar with the historiographical approaches, this might be a possibility that your stand or the conclusive part of your answer will not be in sync with the demand of the question. That is why it is very much important to read about historiography. So let's discuss. So in historiography there are different schools, and why I am emphasizing much on historiographical part also while discussing history optional topics and subtopics. The reason is that whenever we will try to explore historiographical part in each and every topic, so after some time we will be practiced and skilled enough to use the historiographical approaches in our answers, and we don't need to mug up the facts and informations for that, and that's why now we are practicing for that. So here the different schools of historiography. So the first, we are talking about the Portuguese presence in India. This is the topic, Portuguese presence in India. One more thing here is that the questions in UPSC history optional from this particular topic, Portuguese presence in India, is rare. It means the scope of independent questions from this chapter is rare, but we all know that history, especially any optional subject in UPSC mains, requires a interlinkages based understanding. It requires a holistic understanding, analytical approach, and for that UPSC used to ask, you can say, for example, the main topic was European penetration in India, so the question may be related with the overall theme, the European penetration with India, but it might be a possibility that Portuguese presence in India will be an embedded theme in that particular topic. So that's why an insightful and interlinkages based understanding is very much important, and that's why we are emphasizing much on each and every topic. So Portuguese presence in India. So one name of one particular school of historiography you might have heard, that is colonial historiography. Colonial historiography. This is a popular school of historiography. I hope all of you must have heard the name of this particular school of historiography. So first you should know what is the colonial school of historiography. In each and every topic I will repeat the things in this way, you will be able to memorize everything. So whenever we will talk about colonial historiography, so we are talking about writings of British historians. We are talking about the writings of not only British historians, but I will say European historians, because there was a phase of colonialism And Britain was not the only country which was having colonies all over the world. Yes, Britain was having the largest number of colonies. It was covering about more than 2/3 part of the world, but still French, Dutch, these countries also had their colonies all around the world. So this is the most important point here, that whenever we are talking about colonialism, yes, British are the main participants, but there are other players also. So in colonial historiography, we talk about the writings of British historians, or you can say overall European historians during the colonial phase of rule. And what these writings did, these writings glorified the presence of powerful European countries in the colonies of Asia and Africa. It means that we can say that it was a kind of intellectual justification for this colonialism. We all know that colonialism was an exploitative system, but what these writings will do, these writings will provide intellectual support for these exploitative tendencies like imperialism and colonialism. So these colonial historiography and their writings tried to present, or they tried to view, the European presence in Asia and Africa in the form of a civilizing mission. And they will also present a picture that when Europeans will enter in Asia, when Europeans will enter into Africa, what will happen? They will promote modernization and progressiveness. And in this way, they will also try to portray the Indian societies, Asian societies and African societies as backward and stagnant societies. So this is the another, you can say that, okay, effort of these writings, and they will focus more on the superiority of Europeans. They will talk about the racial superiority, they will talk about the cultural superiority, they will try to emphasize the military superiority, and they will say that, okay, for example, we are talking with respect to India. So when colonial historians will view Indian society, they will say that Indian society was divided, Indian society was weak, Indian society was backward, Indian society was stagnant. And when British came to India, or you can say that when any other power came to India, they did what? They introduced law, order and unity in country. For example, Portuguese presence in Goa. So the colonial historians will try to present that, okay, Goa was civilized by the presence of Portuguese in India. And in this way, the first European group, that is Portuguese, who came to India, were the pioneers of progress in context of India. One famous historian who is related with this colonial school of historiography is James Mill. You must have heard the name of this historian. Now, what this colonial historiography will talk about the Portuguese presence in India, this is the most important thing. So when colonial historiography will talk about the Portuguese presence in India, here they use the word Portuguese enterprises, and better you should also use this word Portuguese enterprises while writing answers in your exam. So they will say that Portuguese in Portuguese, where you can say that the Portuguese enterprises were like the pioneers of progress. This is the first important thing, that the colonial historians, they will emphasize this fact that they were the pioneers of progress. They did heroic maritime expansion, heroic maritime expansion, heroic maritime expansion. And while talking about this heroic maritime expansion, they will try to present a picture where they will say that 1498 was the discovery of India by Vasco da Gama. Basically, it was not discovery of India, it was discovery of a new sea route to India, the first important thing. But they will say that it was the discovery of India, and it was one of the heroic event that was done by Vasco da Gama. So it was a kind of, you can say that, revolutionary thing. It was a heroic event that Vasco da Gama did. Okay, so they will try to present it like a heroic discovery, and they will say that in Asia, the dominance of Europeans, so you can say that the foundation stone of the dominance of Europeans was let down by Portuguese. It means the dominance of Europeans in Asia, the foundation of the dominance of Europeans in Asia was let down by Portuguese. This is the main idea that is promoted by the colonial historiography. Now, the next important thing, the colonial historiography will emphasize that when Portuguese came to India, okay, what will they do? So the first important thing is that it marks the beginning of, okay, it marks the beginning of a new heroic civilization in Asia or in context with India. They will try to emphasize this point, okay, and they will try to establish that when Portuguese came to India, what they did, to by their efforts, they broke the Arab-Venetian monopoly over trade of Asia and Europe. It means that they themselves established the monopoly later, but here they are taking this credit that Portuguese came and they did what? They were like liberators. Previously, Arab merchants, Venetian merchants had established dominance, control or monopoly over Asia trade and European trade, and Portuguese successfully did what? They break this dominance or control. And the presence or dominance of Portuguese in India was a kind of, you can say that, legitimate. So they will try to justify the Portuguese presence in India. And one historian will also say about, while talking about the Alfonso de Albuquerque, he will say that Alfonso de Albuquerque was the real founder of Portuguese Empire in the East, and the presence of Portuguese was a kind of dawn of improvement in the Asiatic world. So in this way, they tried to justify the Portuguese presence in India. Okay, so this is what the colonial historiographical approach is about the Portuguese presence in India. Now, when the second group of historians, that is the second group we may take here, that is the nationalist school of historiography. The first we have talked about colonial school. Now the second school here we are talking about the nationalist school of historiography. So first, a very brief introduction about the nationalist school of historiography. So when we talk about nationalist historiography, we are talking about the writings of Indian historians. Here we are talking about the writings of Indian historians. Which Indian historians? So those Indian historians who wrote during the freedom movement. Okay, we are talking about the writings of those historians. During freedom struggle, they were writing, and during freedom movement, whatever they will write, everything will be written with a patriotic perspective. It means this is the time period of freedom movement or struggle. So patriotism will be the guiding factor for their writing. This is the first important thing. The second important thing is that this is the time period of freedom movement. So whatever they will write, that will be having a special objective, and that is opposing colonialism. It means it will also be anti-colonialism in nature. So nationalist historiography simply means what? The writings of those Indian historians who wrote during freedom struggle time, and they were guided with the feelings of patriotism, and through their writings they also tried to promote anti-colonial belief, or they were opposing colonialism. And while opposing colonialism, what these nationalist historiographians will do, they will criticize the presence of Europeans in India. For example, in context of India, since India was a British colony, so nationalist historians will do what? They will criticize They will criticize the presence of British in India. And they will say that the presence of British here, the British are doing what? The British are also distorting the historical traditions of the past. The British are also trying to distort our culture, our history, they want to divide our society. Okay, they want to break the unity of Indian people. Okay, and the British presence in India is also doing what? Okay, they are ignoring, or you can say that they are they are ignoring the cultural greatness of India. This is the first important point. And the British presence in India is doing what? They are doing economic exploitation of India. So when the same nationalist historians will talk about the Portuguese presence in India. So Portuguese are the Europeans group. So these nationalist historians will say what? That the Portuguese also aimed to promote the economic exploitation in India. It means Portuguese ambition was also to do economic exploitation in India, and for that reason they came to India. Or since the Portuguese came first, so the nationalist historians will say that Portuguese were the early agents of economic exploitation of India. Portuguese were not the pioneers of progress. When Portuguese came to India, they did what? Okay, there was already a kind of peaceful trade, but Portuguese did what? They distorted this peaceful trade. Portuguese did what? They promoted which kind of trade? Armed trade. Okay, and that is not a good thing. Portuguese did what? They used the coercive methods, or they did what? They did use of force. They promoted the policy of religious intolerance, Padroado system, and system of inquisitions will be criticized by the nationalist historians. And in this way, they will say that yes, British were successful in establishing their domination over India, but this process was started by the Portuguese. It means Portuguese were seen as a European group which started the process of beginning of colonial exploitation in India and religious aggression in India. Finally, British were successful. One important name here is K.M. Panikkar. The second important name is R.C. Mazumdar. So this is the approach of nationalist historians. Okay, so I hope that you have got it. Okay, and the famous historian K.M. Panikkar also gives a statement, and the statement is, the Portuguese were the first to introduce armed trade in Asia. It means here K.M. Panikkar wants to say that Portuguese groups or Portuguese European groups were not on a civilizing mission. They are not pioneers of progress, but they did what? They had the ultimate objective of exploiting the Indian people. Portuguese were seen as the first European aggressor group, a ruthless group who tried to establish their monopoly in Asia by force. So this is nationalist school of historiography and their opinion about the Portuguese presence in India. The third important school of historiography is Marxist school of historiography. Marxist school of historiography. You must have heard the name of this Marxist school of historiography. Now, whenever we talk about this Marxist school of historiography, you will find that this school of historiography did a scientific interpretation of the historical events. And while doing the scientific interpretation, they used the method of historical materialism. So the one most important thing is that this Marxist school of historiography will do what? This will do a scientific interpretation of the past. And while doing this scientific interpretation, they will use the method, and this method is what? Historical materialism. And while applying this method of historical materialism, they will try to explore, or they will try to do study of economic structures in the country. Their focus will be on this economic structure. They will also do focus on the class relations in the society. This is their main area of study. They will do study of the different modes of production and who is controlling the surplus production. They will also use this method, whatever the different modes of production, and they will try to find out, or they will try to study the material forces in the society, and these material forces are the ultimate drivers of change. These are the basic assumptions of Marxist school of historiography. So they will focus on class struggle, they will focus on system of economic exploitation. This will be the main area of their study, and surplus production, and who is controlling this surplus production. This is the, you can say that, core foundational study of the Marxist historians. So when Marxist historians will talk about the Portuguese presence in India, they will see Portuguese enterprise as, so here the Marxist historians will see Portuguese enterprise, here the word that will be used here is enterprise, and they will see Portuguese enterprise as early mercantilistic capitalism. So here this word is very much scientific. While writing answers in exam, you can use this keyword, early mercantilistic capitalism. Okay, so Portuguese presence in India was seen as the presence of early mercantilistic capitalism. Whenever we are talking about capitalism, so first industrial revolution will come, 1760s onwards, and by this industrial revolution we see the capitalist forces will come, and later, as the reaction of these capitalist forces, we see the socialist forces will come in the society. But before this industrial revolution, we see there was a phase of mercantilism in Europe, 15th 16th century. There was the phase of commercial revolution, mercantilism. When you combine both these two things, so this is a phase, 15th 16th century is the phase that is prior to this capitalism, that's why we are calling it early capitalism, but the phase was mercantilistic phase, so it will be called early mercantilistic capitalism, because the Portuguese enterprise presence in India is traced back from 1498 onwards. In the previous classes, while dividing the phases, I told you that 1505 to 1520 was the phase of their naval dominance, and from 1520 to 1560, this is the second phase. Here they are doing what? Limited territorial annexations, and that too limited. Why? Because they are focused mainly on the western coast, and 1560 onwards, what we see, they are more engaged in fighting with their rivals British and Dutch. So this century is basically which century? This is 15th 16th century, and this is the mercantilistic phase, and that's why the Marxist historians are using this keyword that the Portuguese enterprise presence in India was early mercantilistic capitalistic phase. This is the basic idea. Now they will say that Portuguese did what? Portuguese introduced which policy? Blue water policy. And blue water policy was the policy to establish their naval presence and dominance in the Indian Ocean, and as a part of this blue water policy, they also came with the Cartas system, and this Cartas system was the licensing system which we have previously discussed. Now here they see this licensing system or Cartas system as an effort or as an attempt to establish monopolistic control over the surplus production. So this blue water policy or Cartas system was basically an attempt to establish monopolistic control. It was an attempt to establish monopolistic control over the surplus production. Here I have already told you that the Marxist historians will focus on this particular area, that is mode of production, or who is controlling this surplus. So the Marxist historians will say that Carthage system was an attempt to establish control over the surplus production. They will also say that the religious policy which the Portuguese were following in context of India, religious policy, social cultural policy, whether we talk about the Pedrado system or we talk about the system of inquisitions that were introduced in Goa, or you talk about the forceful marriage, or you talk about the missionary activities that were promoted by the Portuguese in India, or you talk about the system of administration justice that was promoted in India, the Marxist historians will look at these events as all these socio-cultural and religious policies of the Portuguese in India was guided to promote their economic interests. It means that there were economic motives behind these policies, so they will try to explore this very idea. Irfan Habib is the most important name here in Marxist school of historiography, but there are some limitations of this Marxist school of historiography also. So the economic motives will be explored by Marxist school of historiography. The Portuguese presence in India will be explained like this, that the Portuguese were facing crisis in Europe, and in order to find the solution of that crisis, okay, they looked overseas, and here the overseas trade and commerce with India, that is driven by the bullion crisis. It means that Portuguese in India here are Portuguese are present in India, and their presence is guided or driven by the search for the bullions and search for the spices. It means they want to make their trade and commerce more and more profitable, and the kind of early mercantilistic capitalism which is being promoted by the Portuguese in India, that is completely monopolistic in nature. So it is a kind of mercantile capitalism. This is the most important point. Okay, it means that Portuguese presence in India indicates the beginning of European control over the seaborne surplus of Asia. And this is true also because we have already discussed the entire story. Okay, so this is the point. And here this system started with what? Acts of violence and coercion. So this is the point. This is the idea which has been discussed about which has been discussed by the Marxist school of historians. Now there is another school of historiography, so the fourth school of historiography, and that is Cambridge School of Historiography. Cambridge School of Historiography. This is the fourth school of historiography. So when we talk about the Cambridge School of Historiography, so the Cambridge School of Historiography, what is their approach and outlook? Okay, so when they explore history, okay, what generally they do? Cambridge School of Historians, okay, so they will focus, or their study will be more focused or centered around this elitist politics. They will also try to explore the local power struggles. These are the important core perspective of the Cambridge School of Historiography, and they will also try to explore the collaboration. This is the point that we are going to discuss. Now they will also explore what? Here, while exploring elite politics, okay, they will explore what? Patron client relationships. It means that the same things we will explore in case of French also, English also, Dutch also. Okay, so this is the basic idea. So they are focusing on the patron-client networks. They are exploring local politics, and here they are trying to explore the collaboration between the colonial rulers and local elites. The collaboration between colonial rulers and local elites. For example, local elites. For example, when Portuguese came to India, they are foreign rulers. You can say that Europeans. So their collaboration with the Indian elitist class. When they will talk about British, they will study about the collaboration of British rulers, British viceroy, administrators, and their collaboration with the local elitists. This is the point. Okay. Now, when they will explain this event of Portuguese presence in India, they will say that yes, Portuguese arrival in India in 1492. Vasco da Gama was welcomed by Zamorin, the local ruler, and gradually you see the Portuguese presence in India was not possible without the support and collaboration of the local Indian rulers. Portuguese survived in India due to the support and collaboration of the local Indian rulers. Okay, so if you want to see this event as a pure context by the Portuguese, it is wrong. It's not pure context, it is not pure conquest by the Portuguese, but somewhere it was the result of a kind of political negotiation between Portuguese and the local groups, local elitist groups. So it was a kind of negotiation between the Portuguese rulers and the local elitist groups. Okay, so this is the point that has been explained by the Cambridge School of Historians. So here what we see, Anil, Seal, John Gallagher are the most important names here. Okay, so they are saying that Portuguese success in India was possible only due to the support of the local rulers and the local Indian elitist class. For example, in previous class I have discussed about the event of conquest of Goa, how Portuguese were successful in establishing their control over Goa. Was it possible without the fragmentation between the local rulers? No, it means that there were Deccan rivalries. There were some conflict between the central authority and the local rulers, and Portuguese gained advantage of this. They took a strategic advantage. They negotiated with the local powers and they did what? A kind of collaboration, and this collaboration was very much helpful for their survival. So when Cambridge School of Historiography will look at this event of Portuguese conquest, Dutch conquest, British conquest or French conquest, they will say that it was not only conquest, it was not conquest alone, but it was also a kind of collaboration. So this is the point. Okay, so when Cambridge School of Historiography look at the event, there is a serious limitation, and the serious limitation is that while over-emphasizing the Indian politics, they often ignore the role of force or violence. Okay, this is the very serious limitation. Now the next and another most important school of historiography is Subaltern School of Historiography. Subaltern School of Historiography. Subaltern School of Historiography. Now how this Subaltern School of Historiography looks at this event. So first, a very basic introduction of the Subaltern School of Historiography. So when we talk about Subaltern School of Historiography, they study history, or they study the events of history from a spatial perspective, and that is what? History from below. It means that many times we see that in majority of the cases, history has been written with the perspective of the elitist class and the ruler class of the society. Now they are saying that whenever we look at the history, so we should also look at the history as history of marginalized groups in the society. It means that they are often ignored while history writing marginalized groups in the society. And who are these marginalized groups in the society? So the peasants are the marginalized groups in the society. Workers are the marginalized groups in the society. Tribals are the marginalized groups in the society. The lower classes are, or the castes are, the marginalized groups of the society. Okay, so the school of historiography is a little bit different from the mainstream historiography. Okay, and they will do what? They will highlight the popular resistance from these marginalized groups. They will study and highlight the popular resistance from these marginalized groups while studying history. Okay, and they will criticize the colonial narratives also. They will say that colonial narratives or colonial historiography has ignored the voices of the marginalized class. They will say that the nationalist historiography also have ignored the voices of the marginalized class, and now they are focusing on the voices of marginalized class. So while, for example, Ranjit Guha is one of the most important name here. So while studying the Portuguese presence in India, what this Cambridge School of Historiography will do? Okay, so the Cambridge School of Historiography will focus its study on the local communities. So their local communities, this is the main focus of their study. And we all know that Portuguese power was not pan-India. Portuguese power was not pan-India. Okay, it has serious regional limitations. They are concentrated in some regional areas also, regional areas only. For example, areas around Goa. So this subaltern historiography will say what? मैंने क्या कैम्ब्रिज बोला क्या? So here we are talking about subaltern historiography. Sorry if I would have said Cambridge. So here they will study about the local communities in Goa. वो किसकी बात करेंगे? They will talk about the local communities in Goa. The people who are living in the coastal areas, the areas which are under the control of Portuguese. Okay. So what was the impact of Portuguese presence on these people? This will be the focus area of subaltern school of historiography. That what is the impact of Portuguese presence? For example, if Portuguese are using violence, coercion, if Portuguese religious policy is intolerant, if Portuguese are promoting forced marriages, if Portuguese are introducing system of inquisitions, what was the impact of all these changes on the local communities, and how these local communities responded to these changes? This is the main focus area of the study of subaltern historiography. Okay, now when they look at the mass conversions that was done by the Portuguese as a part of their missionary activity, the subaltern school of historiography will say that these mass conversions were a kind of complex social negotiations. It was a kind of caste configuration in Goa. Portuguese presence in India bring a change in the social mobility and the society. Okay, and here what is more emphasized is the religion was imposed. The subaltern historians will say that religion was not merely imposed, it was appropriated here. So they do what? A study at a very micro level, and in this way they respond to the questions that is related to the Portuguese presence in India. So I hope that you have also understood this subaltern school of historiography. Now the next, another important school of historiography here is revisionism, that is also called global or Indian Ocean school. This school becomes important here because global or Indian Ocean School. This is called Global or Indian Ocean School. This is also called modern revisionism. Why it is important? Because this school of historiography studies what? It studies interconnected maritime networks, interconnected maritime networks. It studies about the interconnected maritime networks. It also studies about the global trade system, global trade system. It also studies about the cross-cultural interactions, cross-cultural interactions. देखो, in the case of the very first chapter, that is European penetration in India, this school becomes very much important. While writing conclusion of the answers, you can use the perspective of this global or Indian Ocean School of Historiography, because here what they are talking about, they are talking about the interconnected maritime networks जो हमें पढ़ना है इस चैप्टर में. They are talking about the global trade systems. They are also talking about the cross-cultural interactions. Okay, they are also talking about the cross-cultural interactions. So when they will look at the changes that were introduced after the European penetration in India, they will say that in Indian Ocean, for example, first Portuguese came, then Dutch, English, French, in this way different group of Europeans came. But they will say that when Portuguese entered Indian Ocean, it was not an isolated trade network, it was already an interconnected global trade network. It was a vibrant trading zone, okay, and India was already a part of global exchanges or trade system. This is the most important point. It means that Portuguese are not creators of this system. Portuguese are not entering into a completely isolated network. Portuguese entered into an existing system. This existing system was very much vibrant in nature. So in this way, okay, we can say that yes, the Europeans in India were the powerful European intruders, but their intrusion was, their dominance was limited. This dominance, Portuguese dominance, was limited to the coastal areas only. This dominance was negotiated also. This is the area of their study. It means that if someone says that Portuguese created Indian Ocean trade, this is wrong. Portuguese did not create Indian Ocean trade. Indian Ocean trade was already there. Portuguese entered in this pre-existing system. Indian Ocean trade network was very much vibrant. Portuguese dominance was not, you can say it was very partial, coastal only, okay, and it's not like that Portuguese entered and they changed the entire economy of India. No, it's not like that, okay. Portuguese came and they immediately established control, immediately dominated everything. No, it's also not like that, okay. It took a long time to establish their dominance and control in India, but this dominance and control was also partial. So here what we see that it is a simple story of, for example, Portuguese presence in India, okay, is the result of interaction, negotiation and adaptation. Yes, it is also a simple story of domination, but it's not like that Portuguese came, they got immediate success. We cannot say that, okay. So this is the, or this is all debate that is centered around the Portuguese presence in India. So always remember, the conclusive lines should be Portuguese presence in India or Portuguese arrival in India should be marked as the beginning of European intervention. It was not a kind of immediate domination, okay. So I hope that you have now understood the basic ideas that are discussed around the Portuguese presence in India. Now again I am repeating that there will be no any direct question from this part in your history optional paper. But when we talk about historiography, it's not like that we selected 3 or 4 chapters in modern Indian history and we do some practice of historiography in for particular those 3 or 4 chapters. So history will always remain difficult for you. So when we will do practice, that we will try to discuss some basic approaches of historiography in each and every topic. So ultimately you will find that after finishing 2 or 3 chapters, you will start correlating the themes with the historiographical perspective, and that's why I am discussing the themes in very much detail. The second important point is that Portuguese presence in India is a very small topic. It may be covered in 30 to 40 minutes also, but I have recorded how many videos? Okay, so this is I hope this is part C, okay, in Portuguese arrival in India topic, and there's one more part, that is part D, where I will discuss the PYQ themes, and you will find that PYQ has not been asked independently from this particular chapter, but still I will discuss PYQ theme integration techniques in the next video. And why we are doing this discussion in so much detail, so that the need to read a lot of books should not be there. You watch the videos, okay, you make a running notes, okay, you will listen to the discussions which we are doing. Lastly, we will also discuss PYQs, and ultimately you will find that without any support from the printed books, notes, material or any book, you will be confident in writing the answer, and that's why I always focus or emphasize on the open discussions. So this was part C of the discussion of this subtopic Portuguese arrival in India. In next class, I will discuss that how previous year questions, okay, could be integrated with the theme. If there are any previous year question asked, for example, from this topic, we don't find any direct or independent question, but still in GS you will find a few questions that are independently asked from this topic. I will also discuss that GS mains mein kaun se puche gaye hain, and then we will discuss that how this independent theme, Portuguese arrival in India, could be a part of that any embedded theme or overall theme that has been asked in UPSC. So that I will discuss in the next lecture, part D, that will be PYQ integration or PYQ discussion from this topic. I hope that you have got some benefits from this video. Thanks for watching this video. See you in the next class.